It all starts with the legend of the SSS ranked dungeon, a place said to be absolutely impossible to clear. An adventurer wonders if there's anyone left in the world who hasn't heard of this dreadful place. After all, countless legendary warriors and level 99 mages have tried their luck there and failed miserably. No one's even made it to the middle floors, since deep down at the very bottom lies the most powerful boss of all time. Meanwhile, outside, people are saying that even the hero's party isn't there now. But that getting into this dungeon is just not happening. But the actual difficulty seems way higher than the rumors let on, leaving the challengers in a state of despair. Then, a system notification pops up, blocking the entrance and requiring a level of 999 to get in. Faced with this ridiculous requirement, the adventurers realize no one is ever going to clear this thing and decide to beat a hasty retreat. Watching them leave, a subordinate notes that the party didn't have the required level and ended up taking off. With that, he remembers that even if they could get in, they'd still have to get through an army of powerful monsters. Pledging his loyalty, the subordinate guarantees they will never let any invader get close to their master. At this, the dungeon boss thanks his servants, but he knows this place has a very different purpose. In reality, Tensisha is the level 1 boss of the Twilight Tower, and his fundamental role is to protect everyone inside. Changing scenes, Amamura Hitoya walks through the city, thinking about how modern society feels like a totally unbalanced, trash tier game. To him, lives are constantly ranked, where those at the top get all the respect, and those at the bottom are looked down on. Just walking around makes Amamura Hitoya feel like climbing the social ladder is like playing on insane mode. It's that hard. He thinks that maybe he should just accept his current lot in life. But something inside him won't let him. Imagining his life staying this way forever, the young man realizes he'll never be truly happy. Feeling exhausted, Amamura Hitoya ends up noticing something strange happening right before his eyes. In that moment, the headlights of a truck are bearing down on him as he absent-mindedly crosses the street. Then, everything goes dark, and he wakes up in an unknown place, with no idea where the heck he's ended up. Looking down, Amamura Hitoya gets a massive shock when he sees his hand is completely different. Desperate, he realizes his fingers have turned into pure bone and starts to panic. But the situation gets worse when he notices it's not just his hand, but his entire arm that's changed. With that, a system notification appears, revealing that he is now a level 5 undead. In disbelief, Amamura Hitoya wonders if he's wound up inside some kind of bizarre game. Soon he remembers being hit by the truck in the crosswalk, and is confused about his whereabouts. Suddenly, a floating panel informs him he's in an F-ranked dungeon called the Forest Mausoleum. Just then, a strange noise pops up, and a small creature appears, hopping right in front of him. He immediately gets spooked, causing the MC to stare at the little being that just appeared out of nowhere. The creature is actually a level 1 wolf, which lets out a friendly sound as it looks at the skeleton. Amamura Hitoya observes the animal and feels relieved to find something so small in this place. Still wary, he asks the little critter if he's going to be eaten, fearing that looks can be deceiving. But the little wolf just joyfully pounces on our guy, acting completely harmless. Receiving the affection, Amamura Hitoya realizes the little being is very docile and poses no threat. So, he relaxes a bit, concluding that this encounter might not be as bad as he first thought. However, a strange feeling hangs in the air, causing the mood to shift suddenly. Looking around the forest, the young man notices that the scenery actually has a certain beauty to it. With that, Amamura Hitoya thinks that maybe being here isn't the worst fate in the world after passing on. But the wolf senses something in the environment first, going on high alert at what it heard. Suddenly, a red system warning flashes, announcing that dungeon challengers have been detected nearby. Not understanding the term, the protagonist is confused about who these so-called challengers the system mentioned could be. He then notices the little wolf has started trembling with fear, sensing an approaching threat. Soon, a crossbow is pointed in their direction as voices celebrate finding prey so early. Startled, Amamura Hitoya looks to the side and tries to identify the people who just showed up. Unexpectedly, an arrow hits Amamura Hitoya's skull, catching the poor skeleton completely off guard. The impact throws him off balance, and he starts to fall backward, unable to react to the attack. Just then, the little wolf is also hit by a shot, letting out a yelp of pain as it's knocked down. Both of them lie on the forest floor, motionless after being cowardly targeted by the hunters. Feeling his consciousness fade, the protagonist goes into a deep state of shock over what just happened. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps approaches, and a boot stomps hard on the ground beside him. The muscular man looks at the bodies and comments with disdain that he's bagged another easy haul of materials. As his vision darkens, Amamura Hitoya wonders if his journey is going to end before it even begins. Seeing the human silhouette approaching, he feels the weight of his end coming for him once again. But the little wolf's suffering continues, with the animal whimpering as it's handled without any mercy. Suddenly, Amamura Hitoya wakes up again and realizes he's still in the same skeleton body. Looking at his restored hand, he tries to figure out if everything he just went through was just a bad dream. However, as he pets the little wolf, which is also returned, the young man is absolutely certain that he really did perish. He vaguely recalls the horrible sensation of his consciousness slipping away while the humans did their work. In that moment, the cruel images of the men tearing out fangs and skinning animals flood his mind. The memory of cold metal cutting what was left of his flesh makes Imamura Hitoya tremble with pure terror. He then pictures the hunter's blades separating each part of his body as if it were trash. The image of the human holding an undead skull like a macabre trophy is far too terrifying. With that, he remembers the man mentioning there was a good market even for skeleton ribs. The sound of bones being forcefully ripped out still echoes in the young man's mind, bringing an unbearable agony. Even though he's back, Imamura Hitoya feels every remnant of that terrible pain coursing through his bony structure. But the nightmare starts all over again when the system flashes once more, warning that new challengers have entered the dungeon. In a panic, the MC despairs, realizing that more humans are heading his way so quickly. He then decides he needs to hide immediately to avoid being taken out again by those monsters. Looking to his side, he notices the little wolf is paralyzed with fear, sensing the nearby danger. Without a second thought, Imamura Hitoya calls for the animal to follow him and get out of there as fast as possible. Just then, the invaders display marks on their arms that indicate the group they belong to. Hiding behind a tree, the young man hears one of the men scoff, saying that clearing this place is a total joke. Soon after, the other challenger complains about having to deal with only this reincarnated junk that appears in the dungeon. Hearing that, Imamura Hitoya finally understands that those humans are the real villains of this story. The adventurers comment that the place is an F-ranked dungeon, perfect for collecting enhancement ingredients. At that moment, the archer suggests they beat up a few weak monsters to unwind, and then enjoy a night on the town. The other man agrees with a laugh, saying there's no way he's giving up these easy daily hunts. Hidden away, Imamura Hitoya processes that he really has ended up in another world as a dungeon monster, just like in the manga he used to read. But he realizes that instead of being an OP hero, he was reincarnated as a disposable mob that humans only use to farm materials. He then understands that to those hunters, his existence is nothing more than an item to be collected without any mercy. Even if he's taken out, the dungeon will bring him back so the cycle of hunting can begin again, endlessly. Imamura Hitoya is horrified to discover he's trapped in a personal hell where pain and demise repeat over and over. Suddenly, he feels a chill and realizes something is wrong with his current position. Recalling the countless times he's already gone through this suffering, the protagonist tries to focus on what he needs to do now. However, the hunters find him, and he freezes in shock, coming face to face with his aggressors so suddenly. Then, the attack begins, and the little wolf lets out a yelp of terror as they try to escape the humans' aim. Imamura Hitoya wonders how they spotted him, while the system reveals his and his little companion's low levels. The men are intrigued by the monster's reaction, questioning what on earth is happening. With that, the skeleton starts running for his life, while one of the humans scoffs at the sight of an undead fleeing like that. The archer prepares his shot and states disdainfully that the creature will be done for as soon as it's hit. Several arrows fly toward the skeleton, who desperately tries to escape the certain hit attack. Gripped by terror, Imamura Hitoya questions if he'll have to go through the agony of perishing repeatedly forever. Just then, the projectiles hit his bony body with force, the impact throwing him to the ground. The little wolf watches the scene in terror, sensing the imminent danger as its protector is taken down. With that, Imamura Hitoya is left fallen and immobilized by the arrows, losing any chance of continuing his escape. He lets out a groan of pure agony as he feels his consciousness waver in the face of yet another defeat. Down and vulnerable, the protagonist sees the humans approach to finish what they started without any remorse. One more blow strikes the skeleton's frame, sealing the cruel fate he tried so hard to avoid in the forest. Looking at the remains, the hunters comment that clearing F-ranked dungeons is ridiculously easy and boring. Then, the muscular man approaches the bodies to start collecting the spoils of that cowardly hunt. He decides it's best to start by carving up the little wolf first to make better use of the material. The moment the blade nears the animal, a skeletal hand shoots out and grabs the aggressor's ankle. The hunter stops, confused, feeling the firm, cold grip of the undead he thought he had already defeated. With an intense glow appearing in his eye socket, Imamura Hitoya vows that he will not let them touch his friend. Filled with a new determination, he realizes that if he's being hunted for being weak, he needs to stop being easy prey. So, Imamura Hitoya decides he will transform into someone that none of these invaders will be able to defeat. In that instant, a secret mission is activated, and the system announces the manifestation of a new dungeon boss. He recalls his past life, where he believed that certain realities were impossible for someone like him to change. But now, the desire to evolve is stronger, causing an overwhelming energy to start emanating from his entire body. The hunters are completely disoriented by the intense light coming from the fallen skeleton. Not understanding what's happening, the system issues a monster evolution alert as the protagonist feels immense power coursing through his structure. During the transformation, his bones change shape, and a bluish aura begins to completely envelop his new form. Finishing the process, Amura Hitoya takes on a much more human and powerful appearance than any common undead. Dumbfounded, the humans can't believe that the monster's face has become human right before their eyes. The archer tries to maintain his arrogant posture, stating that F-rank trash will still be trash even if it changes form. With that, the other man agrees and suggests they just fill him with arrows before taking out the wolf. Repeating that he won't allow such cruelty, the protagonist charges forward with a speed that human eyes can barely follow. Suddenly, he vanishes from the aggressor's sight, leaving them in a total panic for having lost their target. Amamura Hitoya appears from an impossible angle, catching the hunters off guard with his newfound agility and strength. With a precise movement, he strikes the archer, who lets out a scream of pain as he's violently thrown to the ground. The muscular hunter is paralyzed, trying to understand how that monster managed to move so fast. Trying to react, the man unleashes a sword strike with all his might, bellowing in rage at the protagonist. However, the steel blade shatters into 1,000 pieces as soon as it makes contact with Amamura Hitoya's new body. He remains motionless, demonstrating a physical resistance that completely defies the logic of this low-ranked dungeon. His eyes glow with an intimidating coldness, staring down the aggressors who once treated him like a simple farming material. In shock, the hunter realizes his weapon was destroyed by a flick of the monster's tail and falls into despair. The archer scrambles away, threatening to shoot again, as he desperately tries to regain control of the situation. He then fires several arrows in succession, hoping the volume of attacks will be enough to take down his opponent. The arrows fly through the air, but the human's confidence begins to fade in the face of the protagonist's calm demeanor. Out of control, the man orders the monster to just shut up and perish once and for all. But the archer's angry expression turns to deep confusion as he notices something is wrong. The projectiles simply shatter upon hitting Amamura Hitoya's chest, without leaving even a single scratch on the surface. The system then reveals the name of the true lord of this place, identifying him as the powerful dungeon boss, Tensisha. With an imposing voice, he orders the invaders to flee immediately and never dare to return to this territory again. Gripped by the fear of his end, the archer panics completely upon realizing he doesn't stand a chance against this being. The two of them start running desperately towards the exit, shouting that it's impossible to beat a monster of that level. Suddenly, a system command echoes through the area, ordering the dungeon gate to be sealed immediately. The archer looks back in confusion, feeling that his time to escape is quickly running out. He notices with horror that the exit portal has already started to move, threatening to seal the fate of anyone left inside. The muscular man makes it through at the last second and celebrates his selfish luck without looking back at his companion. Desperate, the archer begs his partner to wait, but the gate continues to close relentlessly. Fleeing alone, the hunter yells that he's not going to risk his own life waiting for someone so slow. Then, a scream of agony cuts through the air as the archer is crushed by the heavy closing stone doors. Silence returns to the forest as the gate locks completely, preventing any new invasions for the time being. Amamura Hitoya observes the now calm area, feeling the weight of the battle he just fought for the first time. He takes a deep breath, still processing that he actually managed to protect the place and survive those cruel humans. Soon, he approaches the fallen little wolf, feeling a deep anguish at the state of his only companion. The young man wonders if the animal will come back to life this time, fearing the resurrection cycle might have been broken. But a soft light begins to envelop the little creature's body, indicating that the dungeon's regeneration process has begun. At that, Amamura Hitoya is shocked to feel an intense light emanating from his entire new body. Looking at the ground, he notices that the glow is also coming from the earth as the little wolf watches everything. The small creature lets out a happy bark, seeming very glad to be alive and well. Feeling an immense sense of relief, Amamura Hitoya realizes the little animal really did come back to him. Thankful that everything worked out, the young man is happy to see his little friend is safe. But the mood soon changes as he starts to look at his own appearance with a sense of strangeness. Then, Amamura Hitoya notices he now has a tail and wonders why he only has flesh on his face. At that moment, a floating status screen appears before him, bringing new information. The panel reveals that he is now officially the dungeon boss, known as Tensisha. Unable to believe it, the protagonist tries to process the fact that he has become the boss of the place. Far away, in the capital's hideout, a subordinate runs to report that a boss has appeared in the dungeon. Bodo desperately states that the undead has evolved, and that they'll need a dragon to beat it. However, Jildan finds the situation amusing and mocks his companion for failing in such an easy place. From the shadows, the group's leader calls the men useless for not being able to handle weak monsters. Trembling with fear, Bodo tries to explain himself as he faces the intimidating figure of his superior. The gang leader continues to call his subordinates useless for having failed the mission. He then questions Bodo, asking if all the time spent in that dungeon was for absolutely nothing. Showing complete submission, Julden just agrees with his boss as he prepares to act. Then, the superior orders them to take out all the wolves in the place and take the opportunity to test the dragon. With a cruel look, he tells the group to destroy everything and turn the dungeon into utter chaos. Soon, the leader orders everyone to get a move on immediately to begin the new plan of attack. Julden looks at the trapped creatures and states that they are just pieces of equipment that must be useful. Inside one of the cells, a pair of bright eyes watches the movement with some hesitation. Annoyed, the bandit kicks the bars and asks the reason for that defiant look coming from the critter. With contempt, he says that useless tools end up offed and sold as cheap merchandise. Finalizing the order, the chief demands that his subordinates prove their worth during this new hunt. Back in the forest, Amamura Hitoya observes his surroundings with the little wolf on his shoulder. Walking through the area, he feels that the environment seems like an ancient ruin with the smell of trees. Comparing the size of the place, the young man realizes the space is as huge as a football stadium. Determined to understand his new home better, he decides to explore the deeper parts of the dungeon. Advancing a bit further through the vegetation, the protagonist continues his exploratory journey. Looking at the trees, Imamura Hitoya feels that the place gives off a vibe of pure nature. He then imagines that there must be some kind of different creature living in that region. Suddenly, the little wolf jumps and lets out a bark as if it has noticed something important. Startled, the young man wonders if there's someone else around besides the two of them. Staying on alert, he stares intently in the direction the strange noise came from. As he watches the bushes move, Amura Hitoya becomes intrigued about what might be hidden there. Then, a second little wolf comes running out, letting out an excited yelp upon finding the group. With surprise, the protagonist realizes he now has another little animal accompanying him. But the movement in the bushes continues, indicating that the surprise isn't over yet. At that moment, an entire pack of level 1 wolves appears, surrounding the skeleton. Shocked by the number, Amamura Hitoya shouts as he notices there are dozens of them there. Being surrounded by the critters, he thinks they act much more like puppies than wild beasts. Soon, something different catches his attention, and he pauses for a moment to get a better look. Spotting a greenish glow in the distance, the young man wonders if it might be some kind of light. Upon entering a cave, the protagonist is amazed by the number of glowing mushrooms. He then comments that he had no idea such a beautiful place was hidden in here. Looking closer, Amamura Hitoya notices that the mushrooms are also level 1. Getting curious, he wonders if those plants are really just ordinary vegetables. The young man focuses his attention on the details, trying to understand the purpose of so much light in that area. Meanwhile, one of the little wolves plays happily near one of the luminous fungi. With that, he concludes that the wolves are just as weak as the mushrooms themselves. Reflecting on his path, Amamura Hitoya remembers that he has only encountered about 30 wolves so far. He realizes that in this F-rank dungeon, there are only extremely vulnerable monsters. Looking at the portal, the young man notes that the entry requirement is only level 1, which attracts hunters. For a moment, he recalls his former skeletal form and how easy it was to be taken down. Now transformed, the protagonist remains thoughtful about his new role in this ecosystem. The little wolf looks at its master, seeming to seek some kind of attention or command. Suddenly, the little animal lets out a loud yelp, making the young man jump. Affectionately, the little critter starts to rub against his leg, showing complete trust. Observing the pack around him, the protagonist feels a strange connection with the little ones. He then notices that the animal's touch is warm and comforting, despite him being undead. Imamura Hitoya reflects on how these beings are seen only as items by humans. Filled with a new determination, the young man decides he will do everything to protect each one of them. Sitting among all the little wolves, he enjoys the peaceful moment before planning his next move. However, he realizes that staying put near the entrance gate could be very dangerous for the group. So, the protagonist warns everyone that they must return to the safety of the forest immediately. As he moves forward, he explains that they need to go deeper into the dungeon to avoid trouble. With that, he fears that any new invader could take down the small pups without them standing a chance. Suddenly, an intense glow appears in Amamura Hitoya's eyes as he senses a strange presence. At that moment, the system issues a red alert, warning that new challengers have been detected. In disbelief, the young man complains about having to deal with humans again so soon. Looking back, he sees the immense stone gate of the dungeon beginning to react. Suddenly, two beams of blue energy cross the air in an extremely fast and powerful attack. Startled by the sudden impact, the protagonist braces himself to face the new threat that has emerged. Suddenly, two flying, level 51 creatures appear, leaving Amura Hitoya in shock to see that they are dragons. Just then, Jildan appears carrying a crossbow and comments that the rumor about a dungeon boss popping up was actually true. The protagonist notices that, in addition to the monsters, he'll now have to deal with dangerous bandits who have aggressively invaded his territory. Without wasting any time, the hunter gives the order for the two-headed dragon to advance and finish off the dungeon boss. The creature's heads charge forward, diving towards the target with impressive speed and precision. Desperate, Amamura Hitoya yells for all the little wolves to run back to the safety of the forest immediately. In that moment, he's forced to react quickly to avoid being hit head-on by the coordinated attack from his new enemies. Looking back, he realizes the small animals are paralyzed with terror and can't move to get away. Breaking out in a cold sweat, the protagonist wonders if he'll really be able to protect all those wolves fighting alone against such force. Overcome by deep anguish, he faces the situation as memories of suffering begin to cloud his skeletal mind. Amamura Hitoya remembers the cruelty of humans and fears that the whole massacre will repeat itself before his eyes once more. With that, he reaffirms to himself that he is the only barrier between those innocent beings and certain demise at the hands of the bandits. As chaos ensues, one of the small wolf pups lets out a yelp, desperately trying to get its protector's attention. The skeleton then realizes the creature didn't run and is still there, facing the danger in a completely unexpected way. The little animal barks bravely, seeming to want to encourage the dungeon boss not to give up fighting for all of them. Looking at the pack, the protagonist sees that the little wolves are trying to help in some way instead of just fleeing the combat. One of the small ones stares at Amura Hitoya with a deep look, seeming to place all its trust and hope in him. At that, a sad image flashes in his mind, reinforcing his desire not to let the worst happen to his friends again. The little animal makes a determined sound, and the young man realizes he's not just fighting for himself in this unknown place. With a slight nod, he thanks the wolves for their support and prepares to regain control of this insane battle against the invaders. On the other side, Jildan laughs mockingly, stating that the hunt is much more fun when the prey tries to resist its fate. Amamura Hitoya vows that he will never allow the wolves to be targets and begins to concentrate an intense energy in his chest. The bandit smiles sadistically, commenting that he's found some pretty feisty prey and is looking forward to the moment of the takedown. In a serious tone, the protagonist warns that anyone without a useful power will be discarded by him without any mercy at that moment. Suddenly, the mouth of one of the dragon's heads begins to glow intensely, preparing a devastating magical attack. A system notification appears on the screen, announcing that a special ability of the two-headed dragon has finally been activated. Noticing the danger signal, Amamura Hitoya goes on high alert, realizing things are about to get very serious. The creature fires a beam of blue energy that cuts through the air, heading straight for the dungeon boss's chest. Then, the protagonist manages to dodge just in time as the attack hits the ground with overwhelming physical force. Regaining his balance, he observes the damage caused and realizes that any mistake now could be fatal for all the little wolves. Imamura Hitoya notices with astonishment that the enemy's blue flames didn't burn, but instead instantly froze the ground on impact. He quickly realizes that this fire is nothing ordinary and that the rules of this combat are very different from what he imagined. Just then, the protagonist has to move frantically to escape a new aerial assault from the flying creature. The system flashes again as the dragon's other head prepares a different elemental ability to attack the target. A jet of intense fire is unleashed, turning the environment into a true inferno of heat and total destruction. The young man is surrounded by flames and feels the real danger as he watches the scenery being rapidly consumed by fire. With that, he notices the heat is so absurd that the ground is simply melting beneath his feet as he dodges. Comparing the attacks, Amamura Hitoya understands that the enemy's abilities cover the polar opposites of ice and fire. Thoughtfully, he connects what he's seeing with the special abilities he used to encounter in his favorite video games. The protagonist concludes that each of the heads possesses a distinct and extremely dangerous elemental power for his structure. Looking at the bandit in the distance, he wonders if the human also has some kind of hidden special technique for the fight. Then, a doubt arises in his mind about the possibility of him having awakened some new power himself, now as a boss. Suddenly, a system panel appears, confirming that there is an ability available for him to use immediately. Surprised, Amamura Hitoya tries to understand how to activate this new combat tool he just got out of nowhere. The screen reveals the name of the ability, called Rebirth, leaving the protagonist eager to discover its real effect on the field. The system explains that the Rebirth ability allows him to revive and acquire the skills of challengers who have previously failed. With an intense gleam in his eye, the protagonist realizes the immense potential he now holds in his hands to turn the tables. But Jildan yells for him to pay attention to the fight, as he fires a volley of swift projectiles in his direction. Several arrows with a purplish aura cross the air, forcing Amura Hitoya to quickly dodge the deadly attack. Suddenly, something strange happens, and the shots seem to dissipate in mid-air in a completely mysterious way. Confused, the young man notices the projectile simply vanished from his sight, just before hitting him square in the face. He then feels the impact of something almost invisible, and realizes he's dealing with a very dangerous trick from the bandit archer. The hunter activates his own ability, mocking the fact that he found such a resilient and agile prey in the dungeon. The system confirms that the marksman's technique is in full use, making the combat even more one-sided for the poor boss. Imamura Hitoya is shocked to confirm that the arrows really do disappear for an instant during their flight path. Performing acrobatic maneuvers, the protagonist tries to predict the trajectory of what he can't see with his own eyes. He then deduces that the enemy's power consists of making the shots invisible to catch the target completely off guard. Even under pressure, the young man understands that he needs to take down the archer first if he wants any chance of a final victory. Jildan continues to shout arrogantly, challenging the monster to keep running as long as he can handle the exhaustion. A shower of invisible attacks fills the area, forcing the protagonist to use all his reflexes to survive. Suddenly, one of the dragons lets out a cry of agonizing pain after being hit by an attack from behind by mistake. Amamura Hitoya is dumbfounded to realize that the archer himself ended up hitting his own battle companion by accident. Without any remorse, Jildan calls the creature an idiot and useless, ordering it to get up and get back to fighting immediately. The fallen dragon shows its suffering, but the bandit just threatens it, saying he can turn it into a decoration if it fails. Outraged by the scene, the protagonist questions why the human is attacking and treating his own guild ally so poorly. With a cold look, the hunter replies that monsters aren't anyone's allies, and that he's just a fool for thinking that way. He continues, stating that these creatures are just disposable tools that serve only to obey human orders. The bandit cackles while the chained beast continues to suffer, showing just how much he despises any form of life there. Imamura Hitoya feels a growing rage as he understands that, to the hunters, everyone there is seen as a simple object for profit. Memories of other monsters being discarded and destroyed without any mercy flash through the dungeon boss's mind. Looking at his little friends, he realizes he can't accept this cruel fate imposed by the human invaders. The dragon remains trapped and mistreated, serving as a clear example of what happens to those who are submissive to those cruel men. Overcome by a cold fury, the protagonist begins to emanate a much stronger and denser blue aura than before. Jildan notices the change in the atmosphere and gets confused, seeing that the monster is showing an unexpected power reaction. With overwhelming power, Amura Hitoya prepares to show that tools can also rebel against their owners. With that, Amamura Hitoya charges at full speed towards the aggressor. The protagonist faces the bandit and states that he doesn't see monsters as mere tools. Taking advantage of the proximity, he grabs Jildan with overwhelming force, shrouded in blue energy. The impact of the blow instantly shatters the hunter's necklace and crossbow. Looking at the disarmed enemy, Amamura Hitoya coldly questions what he will do now. Paralyzed with terror, the bandit can't say a word under the pressure of the undead. Then, Jildan screams desperately for the dragons to move and protect their human master. The creatures just watch the man, seeming to hesitate after so much suffering he has caused them. Suddenly, red marks appear on the ground, indicating that something terrible is about to happen. Annoyed, the hunter continues to insult the animals, calling them all useless, disposable trash. But the energy envelopes the dragons as they begin to break free from the cruel control. The beasts let out a powerful roar, finally reacting to Tensisha's imposing presence. Fallen on the ground, Jildan panics completely, realizing he has lost control of the situation. An explosion of light appears in the sky, manifesting a majestic spiritual form above everyone. Ending the confrontation, the bandit ends up frozen and complains about being defeated by someone he despised. Observing the destruction, one of the dragons seems to finally find its own will. The animal flies away as the ice shards of the defeated hunter scatter through the air. Just then, a system notification confirms that the level 35 challenger has failed in the dungeon. Imamura Hitoya notices that a new message appears, allowing the activation of a special technique. The panel explains that rebirth makes it possible to acquire the abilities of those who lost in the area. With that, the protagonist decides to activate the command to see what he can get from the enemy. Soon, the system announces that the collection of the invisible shot ability has been successfully completed. Enveloped in a bright aura, he officially receives the technique called Phantom Strike. Amamura Hitoya realizes that he can now steal the powers of the humans who enter his domain. The little wolves watch their master's transformation and are left completely confused by what they saw. Just then, the dragons land heavily and let out a low growl as they face the young man. Keeping calm, the protagonist stares intently at the large beasts that were once attacking him. One of the creatures slowly approaches, and he asks them all to wait a moment. Then, Imamura Hitoya apologizes for having startled the animals during the intense confrontation. He calmly assures them that he has no interest in continuing to fight against them. He comments that to the dragons, he must be just a strange and incomprehensible monster. Suddenly, the environment is filled with a golden glow coming from a new interface. Imamura Hitoya notices that a brand new panel has appeared, something he had never seen there before. The message reveals an exclusive boss ability that allows new monsters to be added to the place. Startled by the news, the protagonist realizes he has just awakened a second power. He wonders if he can really recruit creatures to live inside his dungeon. The system asks if he wishes to add the level 50, one dragon as an official resident. Looking at the beasts, the young man wonders if he can turn them into permanent inhabitants of this place. The panel then identifies the new special technique as the Blessing of the Spirit Guardian. Imamura Hitoya understands that he can give the dragons a home, instead of treating them like objects. He thinks that having fire-breathing allies would be a huge advantage for protecting the territory. However, he looks at the gate and remembers that other adventurers will come to hunt any creature. So, he informs the dragons that their controller is gone, and that they are now free to leave. The protagonist asks what they plan to do now that they no longer have to follow orders. A bitter memory surfaces of how the bandit treated them as mere silent tools. The two beasts exchange glances, seeming to consider the honest proposal they received from the young man. Imamura Hitoya thinks they must be finding this whole situation very weird. Even without speaking, the dragons feel that they don't hate this new master who freed them. With that, the animals approach the protagonist instead of flying out of the dungeon. Surprised, he asks if they have really decided to stay and become part of this family. The creatures make a sound of confirmation, showing that they accept Tenseishi's invitation. With that, the young man thanks them for their trust and prepares to use his new ability on them. The protagonist activates the command to add monsters as a golden light appears in the area. The system confirms that the level 50, one dragons now officially belong to the place. Soon, a notification shows that there are no more invaders, and a wave of energy sweeps through the forest. Imamura Hitoya notices that the beasts are fully recovering from all their serious injuries. Suddenly, a strange movement in the middle of the vegetation catches the young man's attention again. A small white, furry paw timidly emerges from between the fallen leaves on the forest floor. A very cute little wolf pup appears, letting out a happy yelp to greet the group. Seeing all the pups gathered, the young man asks if everyone is okay after all that commotion. The entire pack of wolf pups towards him, jumping and celebrating everyone's safety. Imamura Hitoya hugs the little furry leader, feeling immense relief for not having failed. He whispers that he was only able to protect the pack because the little animal was by his side. The wolf reciprocates with a look full of affection, seeming to understand every word the young man said. With that, the protagonist thanks his little friend from the bottom of his heart for the courage he showed. The creature lets out a vibrant sound of happiness as it rubs against its master's face. All the other pups start barking together, creating a festive atmosphere in the middle of the forest. Sitting on the ground, the young man enjoys the peaceful moment surrounded by all his new allies. He sadly recalls the times when he was unable to save those who were important to him in the past. But today, the story was different, and everyone managed to survive without suffering any real harm. Imamura Hitoya feels that he has finally taken an important step towards changing his cruel fate. Looking at his face, one of the dragons comments that he may have a human appearance. The beast continues its line of thought, questioning if he really believes he is still human. The protagonist gets a huge shock and asks, stunned, if the animal can actually talk. Perched on a high branch, he observes the vastness of his kingdom while reflecting on the future. Continuing the conversation, Imamura Hitoya reflects on what the twin dragons just told him about the local invaders. One of the beasts explains that the challengers around here are actually known as the Dragon Hunters. They form a group that captures dungeon monsters to sell, using the strong ones as weapons and the weak ones as materials. With this, the protagonist understands that his new allies were captured by this trash and deduces they will likely be back soon. The dragon confirms without a doubt, warning that their leader will certainly come to try and clear the dungeon someday. This boss keeps the gang together through brute force and fear, possessing a power that is on a completely different level. Hearing this, the young man realizes these are terrible memories that the animals would rather just erase from their minds. The two beasts lower their gazes in silence, showing the weight of that cruel past. Even so, Imamura Hitoya sincerely thanks them for sharing this crucial information. Then, he raises a finger and says he has a very good suggestion for what they should all do next. The idea is for the pack to stay well hidden in the depths of the dungeon while he keeps watch out front. Analyzing the map, he notes there is only one gate and decides to stay in a tall tree to react quickly to any enemy attack. The dragons just stare at their master, listening to the strategy attentively and without question. Just then, the little wolf lets out a soft sound, clearly worried about the young man's safety. Petting the pup, he tells the little one not to worry because everything will be fine. Already positioned in the tree, Imamura Hitoya admits to himself that he's not entirely free from anxiety. However, looking at his own hand, he remembers that the rebirth ability allows him to copy the skills of defeated invaders. He soon concludes that the more enemies he can take down in this place, the stronger he will become. The plan is to fight, steal their abilities, and annihilate the dragon hunters to finally bring peaceful days to the dungeon. Even knowing the tranquility won't last forever, the young man decides to do what he can now with the strength he has. Suddenly, he gets a huge scare, and his little friends also sense that something is wrong. A red system warning flashes brightly in the air, announcing the arrival of new challengers in the area. Far away, the heavy dungeon door begins to open slowly, releasing a sinister purple energy. The heavy footsteps of metal boots echo through the entrance as the group advances into the location. Several hunters emerge, complaining that some guy named Jildan stole the dragon, stating that the boss will have him publicly executed. Observing everything from above, the protagonist confirms they are the enemy and becomes apprehensive about the huge number of people. Breaking into a cold sweat, he confesses that he's never fought against so many people at once in his entire life. Down below, the bandits laugh and start betting on who will get the most takedowns during the day's hunt. This arrogant attitude sparks immediate fury in the young man's eyes, as he can't stand to see such cruelty. Leaping from the tree with an energy blade on his arm, he warns that he won't allow them to turn the lives here into a sick little game. Despite being outnumbered, the evolved skeleton knows he has good options and quickly activates his new technique. The invaders continue to walk with an arrogant posture, having no idea they are being watched closely. To deal with so many enemies, Imamura Hitoya decides that the top priority is to cut off all their firepower first. Using the phantom strike he stole earlier, he fires invisible blows quietly and with extreme precision. Caught by surprise, one of the hunters gets a shock when his blade simply shatters into pieces out of nowhere. The group panics immediately, questioning what kind of magic attack just hit their companion. But one man tries to calm the situation, mocking the others' despair for being in such a low-ranked dungeon. Observing the confusion, the young man notes that without their equipment, they can't use their skills. But then he notices a detail. He recalls the previous battles and understands that the human powers in this world are directly linked to their weapons. With his eyes glowing, the protagonist deduces that this logic could be the perfect key to winning the entire battle. Trying to counter the ambush, one of the invaders shouts, activating a special technique, and prepares a powerful advance. However, the phantom strike hits the man's weapon head on, breaking the equipment before he can even attack. With this, the young man concludes that breaking their armaments completely neutralizes any threat from these bandits. Taking advantage of this discovery, he unleashes a relentless volley of invisible shots that destroy several swords at once. Chaos erupts on the invaders' front line as they despair at being disarmed by something they can't even see. Suddenly, one of the hunters activates a vision skill, his eyes glowing pink, and shouts that he's found the target. Realizing he's been discovered, Imamura Hitoya learns firsthand that enemy powers aren't just for dealing damage. Without wasting time, another bandit takes advantage of the mark and unleashes an attack with the wind blade technique against him. With pure agility, the dungeon boss manages to dodge the cutting blow that just grazes his body. Focused on the combat, he mutters to himself that his only concern now should be dodging these magical assaults. Moving quickly through the scenery, the protagonist dodges multiple attacks while the enemies try to surround him. Annoyed with the delay, the man in the lead loses his patience and orders the entire squad to advance at once. Facing the horde, the young man's eyes glow with intensity as he promises to keep breaking everything. With a precise movement, he shatters another enemy's sword and focuses on eliminating every piece of equipment that appears before him. Shards fly everywhere as the undead mercilessly disarms the vast majority of the invaders present. Holding only the broken hilt of his dagger, one of the men goes into shock, stammering in disbelief. Seeing the protagonist's overwhelming power shining in the forest, the group finally realizes they aren't fighting some piece of trash. Terror grips the disarmed men, and some already start to fall back, announcing they're out of this suicide mission. Completely desperate, the hunters yell that they're retreating from the dungeon immediately before they end up taken out. Turning their backs on the battle, the gang flees in a stampede towards the exit, abandoning any hope of victory. Several system notification screens begin to pop up in the air, officially confirming the retreat of multiple aggressors. Watching the cowards' backs, The young man notes with relief that they have really given up on clearing the place and are running away. However, a new blue alert suddenly appears in front of him, indicating that a boss ability has been activated. Caught completely by surprise by the panel, Imamura Hitoya lets out a questioning exclamation, not understanding what caused it. Immediately after, a flood of messages informs him that he has just acquired techniques like Wind Blade and Enhanced Vision. Enveloped in a luminous aura, the protagonist is dumbfounded to realize he really did manage to steal all of their abilities. With wide eyes, it finally clicks, and he perfectly understands how the rule of his special ability works. The logic is simple: the act of escaping the dungeon alive counts to the system as a failed invasion attempt. Therefore, any challenger who runs away will leave all their valuable abilities as a gift for the owner of the territory. Along the way, the bandits who decided to stay are startled to see their own companions running like scared idiots. An archer holds his arrow and smiles with total mockery, reminding the runaways that they're in an extremely low-level place. Preparing his heavy bow, the hunter coldly suggests there's a very simple tactic to solve the group's problem. Activating a flaming power, he states that all they have to do is set the whole forest on fire, and they'll be swimming in a sea of valuable materials. Firing a gigantic fireball, the man furiously vows that there's no way he's leaving without taking something out. In the middle of the woods, the little wolf that was supposed to be hiding panics completely upon seeing the deadly flames flying in its direction. Imamura Hitoya furiously warns that he won't let that happen, no way. Activating the newly acquired Wind Blade ability, he prepares to counter the attack. With a swift movement, the young man fires the cutting blow directly at the enemy's flames. The attack hits the hunter dead on, destroying the weapon in his hand and causing some serious damage. The bandit lets out a cry of agonizing pain while his companion is left in total shock. Not understanding anything, the invader realizes with terror that the monster has just copied their abilities. Walking calmly through the smoke, the protagonist asserts that this dungeon has completely changed. He guarantees with a terrifying look that the place is no longer a hunting ground for outsiders. Gripped by pure terror, the last remaining hunters begin to tremble before that oppressive aura. Desperate, the men turn their backs and flee as fast as they can to survive. Imamura Hitoya just watches them flee without trying to stop them from leaving the territory. Then, the immense stone gate at the entrance closes heavily, sealing the place. With the threat neutralized, the dungeon boss relaxes his posture in the now empty environment. In silence, he recalls his old fights and how different the situation was at the beginning. The young man sadly remembers that before, he couldn't do absolutely anything, not even against a single opponent. But thinking about today's victory, he feels proud for having managed to protect everyone from the enemy group. Relieved, Imamura Hitoya cracks a satisfied smile with the result of his own effort. Just then, the panel resets the number of invaders to 0 as the little wolf runs happily towards him. Shifting to the bandits heading out in the capital, a henchman reports that his men have failed in the invasion. The leader, Alvara, takes a drink and scoffs, saying he doesn't remember having such weak trash under his command. With a cruel look, he states that these useless failures are only good as pieces of meat. Lord Pedro Detlas laughs and comments that, as usual, the useless ones must have become dragon food. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echo through the hall, interrupting the big shot's conversation. Overcome with desperation, the fleeing hunters burst into the room, shouting that it's impossible to clear the dungeon. Hearing the absurd shouting, Alvara's face darkens, not understanding what his subordinates are talking about. Terrified, the men insist that there's no chance of them beating that monster. They nervously explain that the creature copied the group's powers and used them all at once with ease. Recalling the dungeon boss's aura, they warn that it is extremely dangerous and frightening. Annoyed by their cowardice, the leader questions if the losers came crawling back, just to make excuses. With pure hatred in his eyes, he calls his subordinates completely useless, worthless trash. A giant shadowy creature appears behind Alvara, leaving the hunters paralyzed with absolute terror. The leader calls his great dragon and announces that it's finally time for the beast to taste its meat. With a brutal attack, the monster mercilessly devours the runaways as blood splatters across the hall. Sitting comfortably, the lord just cackles at the slaughter and says it's a great little show. However, changing the tone of the conversation, the noble comments that the whole story they told was very strange. He points out that there shouldn't be any kind of strong boss in such a low-ranked dungeon. Pedro questions if the rumor is real, admitting that this whole situation smells very suspicious. Thoughtfully, Alvara remembers that his marksman and the twin dragons still haven't returned from the mission. Spurred by the possibility of profit, the noble cracks a greedy smile full of ill intentions. He explains that rare monsters become exclusive materials, and that means a lot of clean cash. Taking another sip, the leader agrees that this unknown boss seems to be top tier. With a sadistic expression, the commander states that he quite likes the idea of capturing this prey. In light of this, the the Lord demands double the profits and suggests that Alvara himself go there to solve the problem. Back in the vicinity of the dungeon, the calm atmosphere contrasts with the threats forming far away. Perched on a high branch, Amamura Hitoya watches the little wolf running on the dirt ground below. The little wolf pup starts barking excitedly, drawing the master's attention with great enthusiasm. Curious about the pup's commotion, the young man jumps from the branch and asks what's going on down there. With a soft landing, he reaches the ground and follows the agitated movements of his furry companion. Without waiting long, the little animal darts into the forest, guiding the protagonist somewhere. Following his friend's steps, Imura Hitoya wonders if something happened in the deeper parts of the woods. During the journey through the ancient trees, he continues to advance through the dense vegetation of the large forest. Soon, they enter the dark area of the cave, and the young man notes they've walked a good distance. Passing by the beautiful glowing mushrooms, the young man observes the luminous scenery with great tranquility. He immediately recognizes the environment, remembering that this was where he found those colorful fungi. Suddenly, the pup lets out a loud yelp, pointing forward, which leaves the young man completely confused. Focusing his gaze in the indicated direction, the dungeon boss's eyes widen as he's faced with something absurd. An immense golden and shining door appears imposingly in the middle of the cave, illuminating everything around it. Dumbfounded by the structure's size, he can barely stammer a word in the face of so much brilliance. Totally shocked, the protagonist tries to understand what the heck a passage like that is doing in his area. The little wolf stares at the light while the young man is absolutely certain that door didn't exist before. Driven by extreme curiosity, Amura Hitoya approaches the mysterious structure with great caution. Slowly extending his arm, he touches his hand to the golden surface to investigate how it works. The instant contact is made, a strong explosion of light quickly blinds the young man. The system immediately recognizes the dungeon boss, forcing the young man to cover his face with his arm. A message reveals that the rank evolution system has been activated, leaving the protagonist amazed. A wave of luminous energy spreads forcefully throughout the cave, dispelling the darkness of the chamber. Shortly after the energy peak, the golden door returns to glowing in a stable and peaceful manner in the center of the location. Holding the little wolf in his arms, he notices the trimmer has stopped and wonders what caused the beam of light. However, several red warnings appear, denying the evolution due to a lack of essential system requirements. Through the floating panels, the young man understands that there are specific quests to upgrade the dungeon. The holographic panel displays vital information that the gate locks an unexplored sector. Faced with this information, he discovers that the only way to unlock the passage is by raising its rank. With this, the protagonist deduces that if he wants to open that mysterious door, he'll need to evolve his domain. Suddenly, the twin dragons appear, flying into the area, curiously asking about all the new light. Surprised by their sudden arrival, Amamura Hitoya turns his head and greets his great flying allies. Looking at the Golden Gate, the young man questions if dungeons can really rank up like that. Confused by the unprecedented situation, Amamura Hitoya asks his new companions if this is a normal thing to happen. One of the dragon's heads calmly replies that it has never heard of anything like it. At this, the protagonist imagines what would happen to the place if the evolution occurred, but the beast admits it doesn't know. Staring at the large luminous structure, he deduces that perhaps their domain is indeed very unusual. With a thoughtful look, the young man whispers that this must be a sector unexplored by adventurers. The intense light from the gate reinforces the idea that a space no one has ever reached before is hidden there. Accompanied by the little wolf, the dungeon master wonders what could be waiting for them on the other side. Changing focus, he kneels near the pups and thanks the little wolf for finding this place. Soon the system displays data about the deepest area of the mausoleum, confirming that the sector remains locked. A new message appears, indicating that the first sacred seal has had its lock mysteriously deactivated. Already outside the cave, Mamura Hitoya approaches the large dragons to ask about their names. He inquires if the beasts could finally tell him something about their true nature. But the animals remain in complete silence, showing that they are still very suspicious of the new leader. Sighing, the young man understands their hesitation and says it's okay, realizing there's still a barrier between them. Suddenly, the protagonist gets a huge scare as he feels a sharp change in the environment. The dragon immediately warns that the noise indicates the main gate is opening. Realizing the danger, Imamura Hitoya understands that another challenger has just entered the territory. The system issues a red alert at the main entrance, confirming the unwanted invasion of the area. Without wasting time, the master and his allies take flight to check on the new approaching threat. Riding a gigantic beast, Alvaro appears with his gang, promising to crush and destroy this trash dungeon. Displaying a sadistic smile, the invader confidently states that he will sell every piece of what he finds there. Shocked by the sight, the young man immediately realizes that this man is the great leader of the dragon hunters. Observing the grim group, He notes that this enemy's power is nothing compared to the previous bandits. Rushing towards the confrontation, Imamura Hitoya knows that this personal hell will never end if he doesn't stop the villain right there. Preparing for combat, the protagonist concentrates a strong bluish energy in his hand. Then, he clenches his fist firmly, feeling the weight of the responsibility to protect his new home. Determined, the young man vows that he will put an end to this using all the abilities he has acquired so far. Advancing with extreme speed, he swears he will take down the enemy commander in a direct fight. To initiate the surprise attack, the system immediately activates the phantom shot technique the young man stole. With an impressive reflex, Alvaro raises his broadsword and blocks the invisible assault without difficulty. The protagonist's eyes widen, shocked to see his stealth attack defended so easily. Taking advantage of the opening, the dragon hunter leader cracks a malicious smile as he turns his face to his opponent. With total mockery, he asks why the monster was trying to sneak around, revealing he had already noticed his presence. Caught red-handed, the young man lands beside his dragons, understanding that stealth tactics won't work against the boss. Facing his prey, the villain recognizes that this evolved skeleton is the mysterious leader of the F-rank dungeon. The army of hunters forms an oppressive line, making the protagonist's huge numerical disadvantage clear. Just then, the commander's gaze crosses the field and focuses directly on the two beasts accompanying the young man. The dragons retreat in fear, while the bandit notices with surprise that they are without their submission collars. Walking calmly, Alvar admits he doesn't know what kind of trick happened for them to get loose, but with a red, murderous glint in his eye, he declares that disobedient tools have no value whatsoever. The cruel words make the two heads tremble with terror, remembering the abuse they suffered at his hands. Quickly, Imamura Hitoya steps in front of the animals, shouting furiously that they are not mere tools. The invader finds the scene pathetic and scoffs at the fact that the hunting materials are now trying to protect the useful equipment. Emanating an intense aura of pure hatred, the dungeon master prepares himself, while the bandit just laughs at the situation. Without losing his arrogant posture, Alvaro raises his sword and orders his men to advance and take out everyone there. Noticing the enemy's approach, the twin dragons prepare to defend their new leader. One of the heads opens its mouth and begins to channel intense ice magic for the initial attack. The young man's system displays the ability activated by his ally, showing the freezing power in action. Then, the other head unleashes a fierce blast of flames, combining the elements in a single move. The fusion of ice and fire hits the hunters' front line head-on, catching the gang completely by surprise. Watching the destruction, Imamura Hitoya is impressed by the absurd strength of the beast's elemental attack. He quickly notes that the enemies have retreated in fear, completely halting the group's movement. Thanking his companions for the opening, the young man realizes it's his chance and quickly activates Wine Blade. To maximize the damage, he decides to combine the cutting magic with the rapid movement technique he also stole. Just then, the protagonist activates another support ability, capable of curving the trajectory of his attacks in the air. Several energy blades cross the field unpredictably, taking down henchmen before they could react. Furious at seeing his men fall so easily, Alvaro swears he will annihilate the traitorous dragons first. The leader points at the creatures and commands his great shadowy partner to devour them both without any mercy. The gigantic flying beast advances with brutal speed towards the former guild members. Suddenly, the magical artifact on the human commander's wrist begins to glow with a threatening light. Feeling the effect of the magic, one of the twins' heads instantly paralyzes, losing control. The bandit coldly explains that the Ring of Subjugation has absolute power, and that monsters have no choice. Displaying his clenched fist, he threatens that on the next disobedience, he will make one head take out its own other half. The magical oppression forces the creature to bow on the blood-stained ground, unable to fight against the orders. The other half of the body despairs, letting out a panicked growl at the sight of impending doom. In the midst of the chaos, a voice desperately yells for them to get out of the way before it's too late. The animal tries to look over its shoulder, realizing that the shadow of danger is already right on top of it. The enormous mouth of the shadowy monster opens wide, ready to swallow the traitors in a single fatal bite. Trembling with fear, the beast closes its eyes, resigned to the fact that it won't be able to escape this pounce. However, Imamura Hitoya appears like a blue lightning bolt and grabs his allies in mid-air, pulling them out of the impact zone. The dragon opens its eyes, stunned, unable to believe it actually survived that crushing attack. Landing safely away from the jaws, the protagonist faces the giant beast that just bit the air. Annoyed by the interference, Alvaro points his sword and orders his beast to pursue the young man without giving him a chance to escape. Holding on to his small flying companions, the dungeon master feels them trembling nonstop with terror. Looking at the giant beast, Imamura Hitoya realizes the animal is terrified because of the one who traumatized it, and he feels pity. He soon turns to the twin dragons and tells them to run to the depths of the dark forest. The creatures are shocked, asking if he really intends to fight the boss and the invaders alone. Just then, the hunters spot the target hidden in the tree and order everyone to fire with everything they have to bring him down. The protagonist remains calm, stylishly jumps from the branch, and assures his allies that everything will be fine. Confidently, the young man promises that he will wait there on the front lines until they are truly free. Hearing this, the animals are paralyzed, totally surprised by the unexpected kindness of this master. As soon as he touches the ground, the dungeon leader advances, surrounded by a strong and imposing blue magical aura. On the other side, the bandits go on the attack, ordering to take down the mausoleum boss at once. Totally focused, the young man swears he won't let anyone get hurt again, and that he will finish this fight on his own. He activates his vision and detection abilities at once, scans the area, and notes that only 10 enemies remain. Taking advantage of the distraction, Amamura Hitoya combines wind strikes and phantom attacks to disarm the front line. With extreme agility, the protagonist flies past, cutting through the aggressor's weapons before they can react. Fallen on the ground, one of the hunters realizes the absurd power difference and stammers that the monster is too strong. Without losing the rhythm of the combat, the evolved skeleton coldly concludes that now he only has to deal with one of them. In the face of the carnage he caused, the young man notices that only the leader is left amidst all the destruction of the gang. Without showing any empathy for his fallen allies, Alvara just crosses his arms and calls them totally useless. The villain then activates a terrible ability from his system and orders the great dragon to act immediately. Heeding the cruel command, the shadowy beast advances with its mouth open and mercilessly chomps down on its own hunters. The protagonist's eyes widen as he realizes the enemy has activated the power of that giant monster against its own group. Seeing the creature brutally chew on the bodies, he is paralyzed, trying to understand what is happening. With the sudden shock, the young man is in absolute disbelief at the disturbing scene unfolding before him. Just then, the pure agony-filled screams of the bandits echo through the air as they are devoured alive by the flying beast. Completely shocked, Amamura Hitoya reacts with disgust, realizing the animal is literally eating the humans. The beast devours everything with extreme violence, grinding the flesh and bones of its former guildmates. The gruesome effect begins quickly, making the great monster's skin much thicker and darker than before. With sadistic pride, Alvara comments that his flying creature gets stronger and more resistant to attacks. The beast's claws also grow frighteningly, gaining extremely deadly weight and cutting power. The bandit adds with a laugh that the beast grows even larger, displaying the true strength of the Diver impulse. Transformed into an unbeatable killing machine, the dragon lets out a monstrous roar that sends a shockwave through the air. The colossal creature opens its enormous jaws and begins to charge a huge, dark fireball deep in its throat. Desperate, the young man notices the size of the deadly flames and realizes the entire forest is in serious danger of disappearing. Without a second thought, he runs at full speed towards the monster, yelling that he needs to stop that attack right away. As he runs forward, he mentally questions how he's going to stop a beast of that absurd size. However, an old memory surfaces, and his eyes light up as he finds the perfect answer for this desperate situation. The young man focuses on the beast's reddish collar, deducing that breaking the artifact should break the villain's control. With the wind blade ability activate at maximum, the protagonist promises he will first destroy the smaller ring. At the same instant, the shadowy beast fires its devastating lethal blast directly at the mausoleum's master. But with a brute movement, Alvara intercepts the path, swinging his giant sword in front of the hero. The strong impact of the human's defense creates intense sparks, completely blocking the young man's cutting air blow. Caught completely by surprise by the move, Amamura Hitoya retreats, startled that his attack was blocked so easily. Hiding behind the enormous blade, the leader scoffs at the little F-ranked dungeon boss for trying to play the hero here. Soon, the hunter activates his own special power, warning that he won't allow the destruction of the valuable artifact. The enemy's oppressive pressure makes the young man swallow hard, feeling that the combat is about to get much worse. Completely out of any control, the colossal dragon fires a brutal beam of energy across the entire cave area. With a tense expression, the protagonist realizes that if he doesn't stop the dragon right now, the entire dungeon will be destroyed. He analyzes the red ring on its neck, certain that the item is the core of control since the leader defended it. In the distance, the hunter commander waits patiently, wielding his weapon like a true wall of pure evil. Determined, Amamura Hitoya jumps, using the curved blade technique, swearing he will shatter that collar no matter what it takes. The human reacts to the aggressive assault by activating his ability and stating that he will never be able to touch it. With pure brutality, the bandit strikes the ground with his sword and triggers a heavy, destructive earth-shattering quake. The absurd force of the mystical attack cracks the entire ground, creating a frightening crater and scattering rocks everywhere. The villain bursts into a sadistic laugh while the evolved skeleton struggles in the air to avoid being swallowed by the impact of the blow. Terror grips the young man's face as he realizes how difficult it will be to overcome that formidable barrier. To make the critical situation worse, the enormous beast opens its jaws, charging another giant ball of destructive energy. The master of the place runs through the destroyed branches of the forest, understanding he has no more time to hesitate in the confrontation. He frantically plans his next move, deciding to combine the Phantom Strike with other magics to overcome the enemy's defense. The young man charges forward, vowing to protect his home and his companions, even with the fireball getting so close to his body. The extreme speed allows him to go for an explosive direct clash against the monstrous defense of the human aggressor. With the sudden impact of their weapons, Alvaro reacts with surprise, feeling the heavy and unpredictable force of that insane frontal clash. Suddenly, the protagonist gets a huge shock as he sees familiar silhouettes flying right over his head. The twin dragons appear, tearing through the skies of the glowing cave and anxiously calling out their new leader's name. They charge straight for the colossal beast and announce they will hold the line up there, so the young man can focus on the collar below. The two creatures combine their powers of ice and fire in a merciless and desperate assault against the guild's giant monster. Extremely annoyed, the hunter leader grumbles loudly that this bunch of disposable losers is getting on his nerves. The villain swings his heavy broadsword at the small ones in the air, questioning if they really think they have any chance of winning. Consumed by his usual cruel arrogance, Alvaro demands that those useless materials not dare to go head to head with their owner. The young man's gaze changes completely as he sees his friends risking themselves in the sky, firmly declaring his final decision. Surrounded by a spectacular whirlwind of greenish luminous energy, he shouts that he will end this whole nightmare right now. With a speed far beyond visual comprehension, the master of the mausoleum advances as fast as a lightning bolt, cutting through the fabric of reality. Grazed by the villain's blow, the small dragons spit up a lot of blood and begin to fall towards the dirt ground. The frenetic attack hits with full force, making the colossal beast let out a thunderous roar that echoes amidst the battle's smoke. Taking advantage of the split-second distraction, Amura Hitoya's silhouette cuts through the enemy's defense like a true hurricane. Unable to recover in time from the invisible impact, the commander is thrown backward and ends up dropping his immense sword in the air. With the surgical strike, the absolute control bracelet on the human's arm shatters into several pieces, breaking the nefarious link. With the artifact destroyed, Alvaro is in complete shock to see that a monster broke the collar. He processes that the Ring of Subjugation is an item of absolute command, making it impossible for a creature to destroy it. But the dungeon master went straight for the target and broke the item with ease, as if he already knew what to do. Faced with the impossible, the hunter leader wonders who the heck this dungeon boss is. Still consumed by rage, the villain refuses to accept defeat. With a maniacal look, Alvaro swears he won't even leave dust of the young man and the entire territory. He raises his giant sword and warns that he will smash everything to pieces with a devastating attack. But in a swift and precise move, the bandit's heavy weapon ends up completely destroyed. Imamura Hitora leaps with extreme agility, leaving the human leader dumbfounded by the assault. After landing safely, the young man states that he has already decided what he will do to protect everyone in the area. Emanating a powerful aura, the protagonist firmly announces that this all ends right now. With a crushing blow, he hits the hunter leader head on using his cutting blue energy. The impact of the attack generates a massive explosion that illuminates the entire battle region in the forest. Soon after, the dust settles, and peace finally returns to the sunny and tranquil woods. Exhausted, Amamura Hitoya takes a deep breath as he recovers from the intense fight alongside his friends. Crawling on the ground, severely injured, Alvaro still curses the monsters, calling them useless bags of materials. The cowardly leader looks back, demanding with a tremble that they not dare look at him with contempt. Suddenly, a colossal shadow appears behind the villain, covering his entire wounded body. The great dark dragon faces him, saying that the hunter spent his life sucking others dry. The enormous beast reveals that it was chained only because it couldn't fight against the power of the collar. Consumed by guilt for its own actions, the creature opens its jaws to take responsibility. Realizing his end, the bandit falls into total despair and begins to curse nonstop. The hunter lets out one last cry of hatred before being completely devoured by his former slave. Observing the scene, the system informs the protagonist that the number of invaders has finally reached 0. At this, the young man sighs in relief, confirming that the war against the hunters is really over. A notification suddenly appears, asking if he wishes to recruit the level 71 dragon. The news catches the young man by surprise, as he reflects on the immense power of the beast before him. Calmly, Amamura Hitoya explains that he can add it to the dungeon and asks what the monster prefers. Remaining silent for a moment, the great animal decides it's best to leave this place. Respecting the creature's decision, The dungeon leader smiles calmly and says he understands. Soon, the twins question their master, reminding him that they lost a rare chance to have a strong ally. But the protagonist replies that he doesn't want to chain someone again, who has already suffered so much from that power. He makes it clear to his friends that he would never become another abusive leader, like those hunters. The enormous beast smiles, stating that its goal out there is to free all its other companions. With determination, the animal plans to save those who are still enslaved in the guild's cages. Recalling the dark captivity, the beast laments having been just a tool used to devour lives. Now free, the colossal dragon beats its great wings to show all its pride in being who it is. With a powerful thrust, the immense creature takes flight, tearing through the air of that glowing cave. Flying towards the exit, the ally promises that this will be its way of atoning for its past mistakes. The giant disappears into the moonlight, leaving behind a scene of great hope and freedom. Far away, the great monster's voice echoes, sincerely thanking the young man for everything he did. Looking at the sky, one of the small flyers calmly comments that their great companion is gone. Moved by the happy ending, Imamura Hitoya maintains a tranquil smile on his face. He turns to the small beasts and affectionately asks if they too don't wish to return to the outside world. Assessing the current state, the young man murmurs that this place is a bit strange while the system recovers. Satisfied with everything, the protagonist concludes in his thoughts that he doesn't hate living in a place like this. Interrupting the moment, the twins reveal their true names, introducing themselves as Ada and Yada. Very happy with their trust, the leader hugs the creatures, thanking them for telling him. But a sudden notification initiates the rank evolution system, calculating the number of defeated invaders. An immense beam of light descends from the heavens, illuminating the evolved skeleton and his small friends. The floating screens confirm that the strict requirements for the long-awaited evolution have been met. Caught completely off guard, the master of the mausoleum gets a shock and lets out a confused exclamation. Enveloped by the bright energy, he realizes with a shock that his dungeon is about to change rank. A message announces the end of Archimond, revealing the true name of that defeated villainous leader. The strong luminosity expands rapidly, covering every inch of the vast underground area. Finalizing the process, the screen officially confirms the rank E level of the Great Forest Mausoleum. Still processing what just happened, Imamura Hitoya is left speechless in the face of so much brilliance. The surrounding scenery begins to transform drastically, breaking structures and changing the entire landscape. Walking through the new ruins, the young man notices the rubble and deduces that the outer layer of the walls has collapsed. Curious about the new limits of the place, he wonders what this evolution really means in practice. Suddenly, the group hears a happy yelp and sees the adorable little wolf running towards them. Jumping with joy, the pup is received by the master, who is relieved to see it completely safe. The little animal barks non-stop, trying to convey a very urgent message in a great hurry. Petting the little critter, the young man apologizes for not understanding but notes its incredible effort. The wolf takes the lead on the path, indicating the direction, leaving the entire group intrigued by its attitude. Guided by the hurried steps of his little friend, the protagonist trusts that this is a serious matter. Determined to investigate the mystery, Imamura Hitoya advances without hesitation into the deep parts of the forest. Upon entering the famous dark cave, the young man comes face to face with something surprising and his eyes widen. He points to the glowing vegetables and notices with a shock that the large mushrooms are moving on their own. The greenish fungi reveal small faces, proving they have a life of their own within that isolated area. System screens confirm the unusual discovery, classifying all the cute mushrooms as level 1. Stunned by the information, the young man realizes that those luminous plants have always been dungeon monsters. However, something much larger catches his attention shortly after, making him freeze in place immediately. Staring intently at the back, he re-encounters that same huge golden, locked door from before. System warnings declare the unlocking of the mysterious sector, opening the Great Passage after the evolution. In total shock, Imamura Hitoya realizes that the unexplored sector has just been unlocked. Feeling a great sense of excitement, he understands that this was exactly what the little wolf was trying to tell him about. Observing the large open passage, the master of the mausoleum and his friends face the intense glow coming from within. Just then, the living mushrooms watch the scene calmly near the luminous entrance. One of the dragons asks the protagonist if his idea now is to really enter that mysterious place. Confident that the creatures there are allies, the young man believes there is no reason to fear the unknown. Furthermore, the young man concludes that exploring the area is the best chance to learn more about the dungeon itself. Without wasting time, the entire group begins to descend a long staircase that leads directly underground. Arriving at the bottom, Imamura Hitoya thinks for a moment that they've found a dead end, but soon notices a detail. Looking closely at the dirt floor, he notices that there is clearly something buried in that corner. Suddenly, the small mushrooms appear agitated and begin to dig the earth rapidly. Using their little bodies, the small creatures work hard to clear the pile of dirt out of the way. The dust rises heavily as the fungi excavate, forcing the master to shield himself from the flying dirt. Impressed by the scene, he understands that the little monsters are doing all the heavy lifting to help him. With the earth removed, a rank evolution reward finally materializes in an intense golden glow. Staring at the shining object, the young man is surprised to realize that the so-called sacred ark functions like a treasure chest. The system confirms on the screen that this item is the grand prize for the evolution of the forest mausoleum. Reflecting on the situation, he notes that winning treasures after leveling up makes everything seem even more like a game. At this, the twin dragons get super excited and celebrate the discovery of this hidden wealth. The beasts deduce that if the place continues to evolve, more and more treasures will appear there. However, Amura Hitoi adopts a serious posture, remembering that valuable chests attract greedy hunters. With a tense look, the young man deduces that the presence of the prize will attract invasions and much worse enemies. Trying to calm him down, the dragon suggests leaving the worry for later and focusing on what's inside the mysterious chest now. Determined to investigate, the protagonist tells everyone to step back a bit as a precaution while he opens the object. Curious about the contents, the master of the mausoleum lifts the heavy lid to reveal the mystery stored inside. An extremely strong golden light escapes from the crack, immediately illuminating the young man's face. From within the ark, a beautiful floating accessory known as the right hand of Prometheus is finally revealed. Holding the jewel carefully, Amamura Hitoi observes that the sacred item closely resembles an exotic ring. Shortly after, the system displays the details of the new equipment acquired in the evolution. Reading the information, he realizes with excitement that this is not a simple ring, but an item with magical effects. Completely stunned by the system's description, the young man goes into shock as he understands the true extent of that magical power. Curious about their master's reaction, the dragons ask if the ring has any destructive effect to be used in fights. Staring at the glistening jewel, Imamura Hitoi admits that the technique will be very useful in the future, although it has its risks. The protagonist tensely explains that this ability could force all the residents of the place into combat. Sincerely apologizing to his friends, the young man decides not to reveal the secret or activate the power for now. Observing the scene in silence, the creature reflects on the strength of that prize and how this mausoleum is surrounded by secrets. The animal recalls with shock how a low-rank boss managed to break a spell of absolute control with such ease. Overcome by doubt, the winged companion internally wonders who the real Imamura Hitoi is. Trying to devise a safe defensive plan that doesn't involve the ark, the master finally has a brilliant idea. Turning to his group of monsters, he asks for everyone's help to put his new strategy into practice. The small mushrooms are confused for a moment, not quite understanding what they will need to do. With enthusiasm, the young man explains that the fungi's excavating abilities can change the entire structure of this place. Motivated to protect his new family, the protagonist proposes that they build a secret hideout using teamwork. Without wasting time, wolves and mushrooms begin to dig the earth non-stop, opening large holes in the forest. Taking advantage of the debris generated by the recent rank evolution, the beasts drag the stones to strengthen the base's walls. To finish the camouflage, they cover the entire external structure with branches and leaves to hide the entrance in the woods. Feeling immense pride, the dungeon boss observes the work done with his own hands. Celebrating the achievement, Imamura Hitoi excitedly announces that the crew's secret hideout is finally complete. Now, the territory map features a very secure base surrounded by piles of rubble and near the Gate of Shadows. Surrounded by the little gang, the young man gives a pet, thanking everyone for their dedication in the heavy construction work. Curious to see the final result, one of the twins asks if they can go into the new little house to relax. Inside, the protagonist excitedly shows that the thick roots and earth form an impassable barrier against fire. Pointing to the back, he reveals the existence of a hidden escape tunnel for emergencies in case invaders appear. The dark and somewhat chilly corridor comes to life and visibility thanks to the strong natural light emitted by the small mushrooms. Despite its rustic simplicity, the entire enclosed environment becomes extremely cozy for the beast to rest. Looking at the relaxed little wolf, the master whispers that this fort guarantees the protection of the entire family. Observing from above, Imamura Hitoi notes with great relief that the entire pack has finally passed out from exhaustion. Thoughtful in the dark, the young man wishes from the bottom of his heart that the rank evolution will bring the lasting peace they so seek. Memories of the past return to his mind, showing how the term leveling up meant only cruel competition. However, clenching his illuminated fist, he understands that in this new world, evolution happens by fighting directly for survival. Recalling his victories, the young man knows that each battle overcome makes him much more powerful than before. Overcome by genuine affection, he realizes that this newly acquired power serves exactly to protect all his friends. Determined to maintain impeccable vigilance, the protagonist stands up in the dark and decides to return to the territory's gates. In the midst of their rest, Ada's attentive gaze suddenly opens as he notices the leader's rapid movement. Exiting the emergency tunnel with the little wolf in his arms, Amamura Hitoya celebrates that the escape route is working perfectly. Just then, the heavy landing of the twin dragons stirs the calm waters of the small forest stream. Hearing the noise right behind him, the master of the mausoleum turns his head, confused, to see who just arrived. Emerging from the vegetation, the two large winged companions walk slowly towards the young man. Noticing the beast's unusual agitation, the young man asks in a worried tone what's wrong. Without saying an initial word, the animal just maintains a deep and very curious gaze on the evolved human. Breaking the tense silence, the creature finally questions the reason for so much kindness and effort to protect the entire pack. Caught completely by surprise by the philosophical question, the young man lets out a sound of confusion as the duo insists on the topic. Extremely curious, the two heads begin to bombard Amamura Hitoya with questions about his life and family. Staring into space, he freezes, speechless, when the beasts ask if his family was also kind like he is. Awkward with the situation, the master just scratches his head, not knowing exactly how to answer such a personal question. It all starts with Amamura Hitoya talking to the dragons, admitting that his parents were normal humans, despite his current monster-like appearance. With a melancholic look, the protagonist recalls that his oldest memory from his past life is not a pleasant one. He remembers being just a small, abandoned child, feeling very cold and an unbearable hunger near a window. But his luck changed when he was taken in by a kind couple who reached out to adopt him. The new family assured him that no matter what scary things happened, they would be completely safe there. Remembering with great affection, the young man tells how he was finally able to call those wonderful people mom and dad. Even without any blood ties, the couple welcomed him with open arms and gave him a life full of love. However, tragedy suddenly struck when a huge natural disaster hit the city with full force. Looking at the rubble, he laments that the entire house was swallowed by the destruction and his parents never came back. Returning to the present, the dungeon boss explains to the beasts that he greatly admired the way they lived. The young man's greatest hope had always been to be able to live in that same generous and protective way in the future. Emanating a great sense of peace, Amamura Hitoya assures them that he has held on to that thought strongly all this time. The dragons are touched by the story, while the young man pets the little wolf, thanking it for the emotional support. One of the beasts observes the master in silence, processing the full depth of that sincere confession. The dragon concludes that, despite all the mysteries, it now understands a little about why he protects the place so much. Far from the forest, the scene shifts to the capital's inner district, highlighting the large government buildings. Focusing on the underground research lab in the East Wing, the atmosphere seems much more serious and technological. A scientist lying down reads a document, finding it unusual to receive a petition to investigate and destroy the forest mausoleum. Relaxed on the couch, the gray-haired woman comments that it's worth reading letters from these boring people every now and then. Very intrigued by the situation, the researcher confesses that this mission is an extremely welcome surprise. Back in her lab, she decides they will study every detail of that bizarre F-rank dungeon with the utmost rigor. Back at the entrance of the mausoleum, the forest scenery remains calm and bathed in sunlight. Suddenly, a strong tremor shakes the entire environment very abruptly. Feeling the ground shake, Amamura Hitoya and his little friends instantly go on high alert. The system warns that new challengers have entered, revealing a large armed group that thinks the place is ridiculously easy. Completely terrified, the monsters despair upon realizing that a new faction of hunters has just invaded their territory. Maintaining an enviable calm, the dungeon boss reassures his family and says he will take care of it himself. Advancing like a blue lightning bolt, the young man swears that no matter who shows up, he will protect this place and everyone in it. Up ahead, the invaders get a huge scare when they see a blur falling from the sky directly towards them. Recognizing the target, the gang activates several magical abilities at once and shouts to take down the boss immediately. Facing the front line, the protagonist notices that all 6 invaders possess very dangerous magical abilities. Without being shaken, the evolved skeleton promises to stay calm and handle the situation step by step. Determined to win to protect his home, the young man activates the devastating Earth Shatter ability. With his eyes glowing with determination, he focuses completely on the enemy group positioned right below. The young man recalls that this is the heavy technique of the dragon hunter leader who tormented his friends so much. Diving in with full force, he states that from now on, he will use this same power to protect the dungeon and smashes the ground. The warrior's eyes widen in absolute shock as they recognize Lord Alvara's signature ability. In a total panic, the group desperately tries to dodge, realizing the fatal danger approaching at high speed. Imamura Hitoya's strong impact generates a brutal shockwave, lifting rocks and destroying the entire ground. Caught head-on by the massive explosion, one of the warriors flies far away and shouts that this power is total insanity. In the center of the destroyed crater, the hero remains standing while the surviving aggressors retreat in fear to the edges. Exuding an intimidating aura, he firmly orders the humans to return to their world immediately. The mausoleum boss threatens that if they take one more step forward, next time he will shoot to take them out for good. Faced with the overwhelming pressure, the invaders give up the mission and rush to open the gate as quickly as possible. Fleeing in terror, one of the men complains that if they return empty-handed, they won't get any payment for the mission. In the midst of the escape, the last man confidently assures them that payment won't be a problem this time. Focusing on a bizarre detail, a small fish-shaped metal device with glowing eyes appears flying in the air. Very confused, the protagonist quickly activates his enhanced vision to try and see what the heck that thing focused on them is. With his improved sight, he realizes the object is not alive, but a robot fish functioning as a recording camera. Watching the men flee through the stone gate, the master understands they didn't just come to clear the dungeon. The heavy front door closes for good, returning silence and tranquility to the depths of the forest. Alone on the battlefield, the young man wonders what those guys really wanted by spying on the invasion like that. Suddenly, the evolved skeleton gets a shock when several red system notifications start popping up out of nowhere. The panel announces the escape of all aggressors and lists a large number of new magical abilities copied immediately. Enveloped in the light of evolution, he assimilates 6 new powers and tensely reflects on the mysterious enemies of the future. Clenching his fist tightly, Imamura Hitoya feels a great sense of relief for regaining a fine arsenal of combat options. Descending from the skies, the twin dragons congratulate their leader and comment on how the entire fight was over in the blink of an eye. Happy to see his companions safe, the young man greets Ado and Yada, feeling immense excitement at their reunion. But in that very instant, a brilliant idea illuminates the hero's mind, leaving him quite surprised with himself. Gripped by anxiety, he floats off the ground and realizes he can finally test one of the techniques stolen from the invaders just now. Using the sky swim ability, the young man cuts through the air, playing happily alongside his flying companions. The dragons celebrate that their master can also fly, and he happily replies that he got the power in the last battle. However, his lack of practice takes its toll quickly, and the protagonist ends up losing his balance in the air quite clumsily. Spinning without any directional control, he lets out a startled scream before diving headfirst into the dense foliage of the woods. Landing on nearby branches, the two beasts look down very worriedly, wanting to know if their friend is hurt. Hanging upside down from a branch, the young man has fun and admits that mastering new techniques isn't so easy in practice. Soon he gets the hang of it again, feeling that the strong impulses allow him to go faster, as if he were really swimming in the sky. During the calm flight, Imamura Hitoya gets curious and asks when Ada and Yada started using their magical powers. The giant beast answers as naturally as can be that they learned right after hatching from their eggs. The shock is huge for the master, who asks in astonishment if all monsters are born with these absurd capabilities. The ally explains that not all are so lucky, citing the wolf pups as an example, which makes the young man agree immediately. Keeping the conversation constructive, the hero asks if among humans there are also people who are born super-powered like that. But the revelation is crystal clear. The only living beings in the entire world born with ingrained abilities are monsters. The beasts detail that without the use of special magical tools, humans can't use any magic on their own. Putting all the pieces together, Imamura Hitoya finally understands why breaking the weapons shut down the invaders' deadly techniques. The dragon explains that magical tools are devices created using monsters with abilities as material. Caught off guard by the grim revelation, Imamura Hitoya is completely confused. He realizes in shock that all the weapons he's broken so far were once monsters. The young man feels a heavy weight, imagining he has been destroying other monsters all this time without knowing. Noticing the leader's guilt, the beast says he's too soft and doesn't need to look like that. The ally details that the rings of subjugation force creatures to become resources. It becomes clear that the enslavement isn't just for obedience, but to drag the beasts into the human world. The animal laments that the items are beings who never returned home and serve even after their end. To comfort him, the partner states his belief that breaking the tools is actually a way of freeing them. Feeling a great sense of relief in his heart, the protagonist whispers that he's happy if that's really true. He understands that there are horrible tragedies in the world he doesn't even know about yet. However, the focus now is to protect everyone living in this dungeon with all his might. Meanwhile, the Lord cackles upon learning that the guild failed to defeat the boss everyone is talking about. A mysterious man in the shadows comments that at least it gives him a good reason to visit the capital. Without hiding his contempt, Lord Pedro Detless states that none of those hunters were good for anything. Despite the failures, the noble laughs, celebrating that he is still a very lucky man. He holds the robot fish, impressed to have received help from such an important person. The genius Professor Alain Toulon appears seated, praising the Lord's excellent espionage work. The small mechanical device projects, sending the recorded information into the air. Observing the hologram, the researcher agrees, very satisfied with the recording quality. Dumbfounded by the technology, the ruler confesses he has never seen such an incredible item before. He is shocked to see moving images with floating words, admiring the brilliant invention. With the collection complete, the professor declares the end of the preliminary reconnaissance of the bizarre dungeon. Very excited about the results, the scientist assures them that the next step is now very obvious. Quite curious about the plans, the noble approaches, asking what this next stage would be. Without beating around the bush, the investigator replies that they need to conduct an exploration directly on site. Walking confidently, he promises to study the scandalous dungeon completely, and then destroy it. In the forest, the master flies peacefully, noticing the little wolf's joy, who has completely lost its fear of heights. Suddenly, a huge red system panel flashes, alerting them to a newly detected challenger. Immediately, the young man goes on high alert and warns his companions about the imminent invasion. The rumble at the entrance makes the group wonder what kind of danger they will face this time. The heavy stone door begins to open slowly, shrouded in a dark and tense atmosphere. Landing softly on the ground, the protagonist observes the surrounding area without seeing anything at all. The scenery near the large entrance remains eerily empty and silent. Hidden among the leaves, he is confused for not spotting any invader after the gate opened. Soon, a calm voice echoes, asking if he is the boss here, raising the suspicion that they are hidden. Startled, the young man jumps back, desperately trying to find the source of that sound. Just then, a mysterious figure begins to emerge slowly, using some kind of advanced camouflage. The scientist professor appears unexpectedly, floating upside down, and greets the monster. Completely in shock, the master of the mausoleum can't believe the guy just appeared out of nowhere. The tension rises as the young man realizes he can't see the invader's status window or his ability. The two stand face to face, creating a climate of intense suspense in the middle of the battlefield. Without letting his guard down, the evolved skeleton demands to know the man's identity and what he seeks. With an arrogant posture, the human states that he came to clear the dungeon and asks where the treasure is. The young man's mind flashes to the hidden ark, confirming his fear that the prize would attract trouble. Faced with the revelation, the protagonist mentally confirms that greed is the real reason for the invasion. Floating calmly, the professor reinforces that his only objective is the complete clearing of the place. Not fully understanding the term used, the young man repeats the phrase, wanting more details. The human is surprised by the beast's ignorance and begins to explain what happens if they steal the prize. Maintaining a cold smile, he reveals that the entire structure simply disappears from the face of the earth. The professor details that the end comes the exact moment the sacred item falls into the enemy's hands. With that, all the monsters in the place are completely erased from existence along with the ruins. Sadistically, the scientist assures him that total destruction is just the natural rule of how this world operates. Consumed by an instinctive fury, Amamura Hitoya charges forward, declaring that he will never allow such an atrocity. Preparing his power, the man conjures fish-shaped projectiles and confesses he was expecting this reaction. With a swift attack, the hero's hand tries to cut the air to hit the talkative investigator. However, the scientist dodges the physical blow with absurd ease and quickly moves away. Assessing the various magical projectiles flying around, the young man devises a defensive strategy. Taking advantage of the opening, he fires curved wind blades to shoot down the fish while trying to dodge. But the invader defends against the cuts just by raising his hand and jokes that the strategy was predictable. An entire swarm of sharp mechanical fish flies menacingly towards the pack leader. Surprisingly, the magical weapons shattered by the hero begin to reconstruct themselves in mid-air. Overcome with desperation, he realizes in shock that his offensive is causing no damage to the devices. Circled by his aquatic arsenal, the professor mocks the boy, saying he's terrible against this trick. The young man swallows hard, trying to understand how the heck he's going to fight an opponent immune to any kind of cut. Suddenly, a colossal energy of ice and fire begins to charge just out of the scientist's line of sight. A devastating beam cuts across the battlefield, crashing down violently from the sky right on the human invader's position. With the massive impact, the master of the mausoleum watches the scene, startled by the brutal force that just emerged. The smoke clears, revealing the villain trapped in a prison of sharp shards, a victim of Ada's elemental magic. The great dragon furiously warns the arrogant enemy to never dare touch a single hair on their leader's head. Even after being hit by the deadly spell, Elaine smiles mockingly, telling the stolen animal from the old guild to calm down. In response to the resistance, a small aerial device releases a blinding beam directly at the protective beast's face. Surprised by the dirty attack, the great creature beats its wings rapidly in an evasive maneuver to avoid being shot down. Regaining a stable flight, the wild Ellie snarls with mortal hatred, showing that the fight is far from over. With a carefree posture, the mysterious scientist walks towards the trio, ready to resume the massacre. Looking at his surroundings, the scientist notices that there are no rings of subjugation in sight. Completely intrigued, he mutters to himself, questioning how those creatures managed to break free from control. The professor floats towards them and directly asks how the monsters that escaped the hunters removed the rings. In response, the great twin dragons just snarl menacingly at the human. Sensing the hostility, Elaine Tulin naturally deduces that they're not in the mood for a chat. Suddenly, the invader is caught by surprise by something rapidly appearing in front of him. Taking advantage of the distraction, Amura Hitoya charges forward with full force, using his cutting phantom strike ability. As he quickly retreats, the man comments that the dungeon boss does some pretty scary things. Protecting his allies, the protagonist glows intensely and warns the scientist to stay away from his friends. The investigator realizes things have heated up and decides he's had enough for today. With that, the mysterious human begins to fade into thin air as he bids a very casual farewell. The master of the mausoleum is completely confused and wonders if the enemy really decided to retreat like that. To get the reward, he tries to activate the skill, stealing ability after the escape, but notices nothing happened. A red system warning appears, denying the collection, leaving the boy in total shock. Desperate, Amamura Hitoya doesn't understand why his technique failed against that fleeing invader. The young man remembers that defeating enemies and stealing their abilities is what makes the dungeon rank up. However, he reflects with tension that this doesn't eliminate the challenges against opponents with unknown statuses. The professor's intimidating aura leads the young man to conclude that this adversary is unlike anyone he has ever faced. Far away, in the Lord's mansion, Elaine Tulin announces that he has changed his mind before clearing the place. Hearing this, Pedro Detless is intrigued and asks if there was an unforeseen issue with the mission. The scientist reveals that he found something perfect for his research, and that he needs to change his plans. He explains his desire to capture the flying twins first, as clearing the territory would make the monsters disappear. Excited by the idea, the ruler greedily suggests that the dungeon boss be captured as well. Rubbing his hands, the lord details that this leader would fetch a lot of money as a rare material. To ensure success, the noble promises to provide an infinite number of containment rings for the capture. With a cold smile, the professor accepts the proposal, but demands that the support team not get in his way during the hunt. Satisfied with the deal, Pedro Detless just fully agrees with the imposed condition. The ruler guarantees that his henchmen are very skilled, even capable of taking down giant beasts. Pointing to the back of the luxurious room, the lord introduces the great warrior responsible for taking down the former monster. Back in the calm of the forest, Amamura Hitoya stares at the golden arc alongside his flying companions. Looking at the evolution prize, the hero recalls the challenger's words about what happens if the treasure is stolen. With the glistening jewel in his hands, he understands the weight of the responsibility, that losing it means the end of the dungeon. With a completely determined look, the young man swears that there's no way he'll let the humans take that object. With that, the protagonist devises a defensive strategy, separating his friend's hideout from the treasure's location. However, a large red system panel flashes on the screen, indicating the invasion of new challengers in the territory. Immediately, the evolved skeleton darts through the dark scenery, rushing to intercept the newly arrived threat. Far away, the immense, glowing door of the mausoleum begins to open, releasing a strong luminous energy. Without losing a single second, the leader advances with extreme speed, firing a volley of direct magical blows. Emerging from the light, the scientific professor walks with his mechanical fish, and offers a greeting laden with irony. Furious, Amamura Hitoya accuses the invader of trying to steal the treasure, reminding him that it would cause a total collapse. Maintaining an irritating calm, the human explains that today's objective is just to capture a test subject for research. Gripped by terror, the young man notices a frightening detail about the weapons accompanying the investigator. The metal fish grows bizarrely in a matter of seconds, preparing for a fatal pounce in mid-air. With the swift assault, the enormous device attacks with full force, diving directly at the hero's position. Caught head-on, the protagonist realizes he wasn't devoured, but rather imprisoned inside an indestructible magic bubble. With the ring in his hands, Elaine Tulin prepares for the hunt and asks where the flying beasts have hidden. Banging on the bubble's wall, the master of the mausoleum despairs as he recognizes that evil control item. Dark memories flood his mind, showing how that cruel artifact forces absolute obedience from monsters. Overcome by an immense protective rage, he concentrates all possible energy, swearing he will never allow this again. Activating the powerful wind blade, Amamura Hitoya shatters the prison, affirming that his friends will not suffer again. Meanwhile, in the depths of the isolated forest, the elite guard advances silently through the woods. Analyzing the tracks left by the monsters, the human henchman confirms that the scientist predicted the route exactly. He recalls the coordinated plan where the professor would be responsible for hunting the powerful twins directly out front. With a smile under his mask, the invader thinks about how he will manage to sneak in and steal the prize from the location. Walking with extreme confidence through the territory, he asserts that this is their perfect attack strategy this time. His heavy footsteps draw very close to a large pile of rocks hidden by the green foliage. Inside the secret hideout, the little wolf pup wakes up, confused, upon hearing a very strange noise from above. Sniffing the air attentively, the small pup tries to identify what kind of threat is lurking around the base's security. Outside, the intimidating silhouette of the armed henchman casts a frightening shadow right at the entrance of the hole. Noticing the sudden deadly approach, the little animal's huge eyes widen, filled with the purest panic. Completely terrified, the furry little friend begins to tremble nonstop in the darkness of its safe hideout. But remembering the affection of its protective master, the creature puffs out its chest with courage to protect its sleeping family. Far away, the young man's determination reverberates, knowing that losing the sacred jewel would bring total ruin to them all. Sticking its small white paw out from the rocks, the little pup decides to face the enormous danger head-on. In an absurdly brave leap, the little wolf places itself right in the path to block the advance of the bloodthirsty hunter. Back in the main combat, the evolved skeleton charges, tearing through the cave air with maximum agility. Taking advantage of the momentum, the young man lands a powerful and direct blow on the floating structures around him. Unfazed, the scientific professor summons several containment chains, stating he needs to trap the boy first. To get rid of the magical trap, Amamura plummets from the sky, activating a cutting tornado towards the human. Enveloped in pure blue magic, he furiously declares that he will shatter any control artifact that appears. The investigator walks with a smile, claiming it's simply impossible for a mere monster to destroy those absolute rings. However, the young man pays no heed, remembering when he broke the cruel collars that bound his great friends. The memories of his companions, agonizing suffering strengthen his will, proving the strength of his heart. Faced with the improbable revelation, Alain Tulin stops walking instantly, and his posture shifts to one of total suspicion. Consumed by an indignant shock, the scientist crushes the object in his own hand, demanding to know how the beast broke the ring. Surprised, the scientist reflects that this bizarre place has a monster capable of breaking the bonds of absolute subjugation. Observing the evolved skeleton's advance, he understands that it was the dungeon boss himself who destroyed the artifact. Amamura charges furiously through the air, questioning why the human would use something so despicable against the beasts. The young man asserts that it's not a simple collar, but a cruel device that enslaves both body and mind. Overcome with rage, the protagonist charges forward, focused on taking down the investigator once and for all right there. Easily dodging the attack, the professor replies with total nonchalance that he is well aware of all that. With a relaxed posture, the human agrees and accepts the confrontation with a confident smile. Suddenly, a loud, desperate yelp echoes through the forest, completely changing the tense atmosphere of the battle. Landing on the ground, the dungeon boss's eyes widen, and he freezes upon recognizing his friend's familiar sound. He deduces the howl belongs to the little wolf and panics, imagining that something terrible has happened at the base. Alain Tulin notices his opponent's hesitation and mockingly asks if he's not going to go help the little critter. The boy turns his head, tense, feeling the weight of the choice between continuing the fight or saving his family now. Without a second thought, he darts towards the forest, deciding that everyone's safety is his priority. The invader watches the escape calmly, celebrating that he has finally found the power he was looking for. Far away, the little pup trembles with terror as it tries to stand firm in the face of imminent danger. Cornered in the dark woods, the little animal whimpers quietly as the invader's silhouette stealthily approaches. The armed henchman smiles sadistically, praising the pup's sense of smell despite it being so incredibly weak. Displaying his purplish spear, Ron Solo Lopez decides to honor the praise effort by testing his new weapon directly on it. The little wolf curls up on the ground in tears, closing its eyes, believing that its end has finally come in the woods. But in the blink of an eye, Amamura appears, tearing through the sky, and intercepts the deadly blow with his twin blades. Facing the aggressor's weapon up close, the young man immediately understands that there was another challenger hidden there. Positioned in front of the pup, he tells the human to back off and declares that he will be his true opponent. The hunter cracks an excited smile upon recognizing the dungeon boss, stating that it will be a lot of fun to take him out today. With the enemy advancing, the hero jumps back and desperately orders the wolf to flee the fight scene. The aerial clash generates an absurd explosion of sparks as the blue and purple energies collide violently, Taking advantage of the retreat, the master of the mausoleum uses all his agility to dodge the consecutive cuts in front of him. Worried about the destruction of the environment, he realizes he can't use his stronger attacks among the trees. The protagonist recognizes the spearman's experience, noting that each of the opponent's thrusts is perfectly calculated. Landing on the dirt ground, the boy assesses the tense situation, while the human invader prepares to attack again. However, upon focusing his eyes on the enemy's equipment, the evolved skeleton freezes, noticing a very familiar detail. Looking at the purplish blade, the protagonist gets a pit in his stomach, feeling that he has seen it somewhere before. A memory of the great dark drag's imposing horn instantly flashes into his mind, like a very painful image. It hits him hard when he remembers that magical tools are forged using the world's victimized beasts. With a pale face, the young man processes the absurd cruelty of turning innocent monsters into mere luxury materials. Consumed by blind hatred, he directly asks if the spear in the human's hand was made from the great dragon. The henchman lets out an ironic laugh, connecting the dots and questioning if it was the boy who freed the flying creature. Displaying the weapon with great pride, the invader explains that the equipment grows and gets stronger with every hunt he completes. Ronsolo mocks the hero's face, thanking him for providing such a wonderful magical tool in the dungeon. The spearman lets out a hysterical laugh while the young man is consumed by a silent, overwhelming rage inside. The dungeon boss grits his teeth, remembering that he didn't free the giant alley for it to end up in such a tragic way. Spinning the spear showily, the man declares with pure arrogance that hunting monsters never gets old for him. In a quick blink of an eye, Amamura Hitoya explodes in a blue aura and charges forward with uncontrollable fury. The hunter's eyes widen in shock, caught completely off guard by the boy's sudden burst of speed. The brutal impact hits the human's defense, violently pushing him back into the dense forest. With a clenched, brightly glowing fist, the protagonist remembers that the beast's true wish was to save its companions. Vowing to honor his great friend's memory, the young man decides he will not allow that power to be used for more massacres. Completely determined, he faces the enemy and declares loud and clear that he will destroy the spear at any cost. Using all his strength, the evolved skeleton delivers a crushing blow from top to bottom without any mercy. The henchman groans in pain trying to block, startled by the brutal pressure contained there even without the use of special abilities. The hunter's confidence vanishes into thin air, replaced by a sudden terror in the face of the great hero's undeniable monstrousness. The fierce exchange of blows forces the aggressor to retreat further and further back to avoid being cut in half in the battle. Breaking into a cold sweat, the spearman despairs, refusing to accept that he could fail in a simple rank E dungeon. Out of control, Ronsolo bellows in rage that defeat here is absolutely impossible in his career. The master of the mausoleum pauses for a second in mid-air, surprised to realize the arrogant warrior is trying to make a cowardly escape. The bandit runs desperately through the ancient trees, seeking to get away from the young protagonist's relentless fury. Visually tracking the chase, the young man tries to deduce what the heck is so important in that direction of the woods. The henchman cracks a manic and desperate smile, celebrating that he has finally found his new fragile target. Alone in a lit clearing, the little wolf freezes in terror as the large invader suddenly shouts in its direction. Channeling all the purple magic from the weapon, the man warns that the item gets stronger with each takedown and takes careful aim at the little animal. Overcome by absolute panic in the air, Amamura Hitoya screams with all his might, pleading for the little pup to run. The little wolf scrambles backward on the ground and lets out a terrified yelp as it sees the deadly spear tip approaching. Unexpectedly, Professor Elaine Tulin reappears, floating peacefully and majestically right in front of the small target. Both the human spearman and the young boy's eyes widen in absolute shock at the sudden magical intervention. Confused by his ally's inexplicable presence, Ronsolo questions out loud what the other challenger is doing there. Consumed by sadistic greed, the henchman smiles, stating that his guildmate should feel honored to be the first sacrifice. However, the massive spear blow is instantly stopped in mid-air by a school of mechanical fish surrounding the researcher. Maintaining his completely untouchable posture, the scientist observes his own ally's offense without showing the slightest real concern. The evolved skeleton tries to process the bizarre situation in front of him, asking the exact reason why the villain protected the wolf. Quite annoyed by the audacity, the warrior demands to know why his own superior is interfering with their entire hunting plan. Floating in a superior and proud manner, Tulin explains that it's pointless for the lackey to take out weak monsters, to try and strengthen his useless technique. The investigator asserts that this shallow strategy is useless in this particular dungeon and calls his companion a complete dead weight. Displaying a frighteningly cynical smile, he advises the frustrated henchman to turn around and simply go home crying. His hunter's pride wounded, the spearman furrows his brow in fury, asking if the boss considers him inferior to the local monster. The scientist calmly sighs at the outburst, admitting that such a proud man would never back down from the dispute peacefully. Finally, the professor declares that the warrior is too weak to win, but will serve perfectly to begin his great research. Observing the young man with the wolf, the scientist decides to change his plans and announces that the objective of clearing the place is cancelled, as he needs to capture the boss for his research. Completely indignant at the humiliation, the human spearman demands that his superior take back what he said, threatening to make him eat his own words by force. Consumed by blind fury, the warrior charges at the professor with his spear in hand, vowing to turn even his own partner into pure nutrients for the weapon. The henchman unleashes his brutal magic attack, while Amamura Hitoya watches the explosion up close, not understanding any of this internal squabble madness. At this, the researcher sighs with a certain irony and comments to the boy that, as he can see for himself, the two invaders have just started fighting each other. Maintaining a relaxed posture, Alain Tulin surprises the master of the mausoleum by making a very unusual proposal, asking if he wants to team up. Caught completely by surprise by the enemy's absurd offer, Amamura Hitoya just lets out a cry of utter confusion as he stares at the two invaders in front of him.